It's probably just anxiety again, Mom said, barely looking up from her phone as I clutched my chest, trying to catch my breath. You always do this when you're stressed. I was 19, and this was the third time this week I'd felt the crushing pain in my chest. Each episode was getting worse, but my parents had mastered the art of dismissal. Mom, this feels different, I gasped, steadying myself against the kitchen counter. It's like someone's sitting on my chest. Dad walked in, coffee mug in hand, rolling his eyes at the scene before him. Olivia, enough with the dramatics. Your mother's right, it's anxiety. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about everything, you'd feel better. I wanted to scream. For months, I'd been telling them something was wrong. The shortness of breath during my morning runs, the dizziness that came out of nowhere, the way my heart would race even when I was sitting still. But in our family, physical complaints were always met with the same response. Stop being dramatic. I'm going to urgent care, I announced, grabbing my keys. Don't waste your money, Dad called after me. Take a deep breath and go lie down. This is exactly why we can't take you seriously. You overreact to everything. I ignored him, walking to my car despite the tightness in my chest. The urgent care doctor listened to my symptoms with a frown, immediately ordering an EKG. Unlike my parents, she didn't dismiss my concerns. Your EKG shows some irregularities, she said, her expression serious. I'm referring you to a cardiologist. This needs to be checked out properly. When I got home, clutching the referral paper, my parents were watching TV in the living room. The doctor says I need to see a cardiologist, I said, my voice shaking. The EKG showed something's wrong. Mom sighed dramatically. Those urgent care doctors just want to run up bills. You're 19, Olivia. What could possibly be wrong with your heart? Your mother's right, Dad added. They're probably just being overcautious because you worked yourself up so much. We're not wasting money on unnecessary tests. That night, lying in bed, I felt the familiar tightness return. But this time, it was accompanied by a shooting pain down my left arm. Terror gripped me as I remembered reading about heart attack symptoms. With trembling fingers, I called my best friend Anna. I'm coming to get you, she said immediately after I described what was happening. Don't argue. 20 minutes later, I was in Anna's car, heading to the emergency room. I'd left a note for my parents, but they were both heavy sleepers. They probably wouldn't find it until morning. The ER doctor took one look at my symptoms and immediately ordered a series of tests. As I lay there, connected to monitors, I couldn't help but think about all the times my parents had dismissed my concerns. The childhood asthma they'd insisted was just me being out of shape. The severe migraines they'd attributed to too much screen time. By morning, my phone was buzzing with angry messages from my parents. How dare you go to the ER without telling us? Mom's text read. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost? But their anger turned to confusion when the cardiologist, Dr. Martinez, came in with my test results. Her face was serious as she looked at the monitors and my chart. Olivia, she said, you have a condition called Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. It's a congenital heart condition that affects the heart's electrical system. The symptoms you've been experiencing, they weren't anxiety. Your heart has an extra electrical pathway that's causing dangerous arrhythmias. I felt a mix of validation and fear. All those times I'd known something was wrong, I'd actually been right. The cardiologist continued explaining, but I was distracted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. My parents had arrived, and from their faces, I could tell they'd heard enough to know they'd made a terrible mistake. How serious is this? Mom asked, her voice small, all traces of dismissiveness gone. Dr. Martinez turned to them, her expression stern. If left untreated, WPO can be life-threatening. Olivia needs surgery to correct the abnormal pathway. She's lucky she came in when she did. These episodes she's been having, they weren't panic attacks. Her heart was literally short-circuiting. I watched as the color drained from my parents' faces. Dad, who had never taken my dramatic episodes seriously, looked like he might collapse. Mom's hands were shaking as she reached for my bed rail. We thought, she began, but Dr. Martinez cut her off. You thought she was overreacting, the doctor said firmly. Unfortunately, I see this too often. Young people's health concerns being dismissed until something serious happens. Olivia needs support right now, not judgment. For the first time in my life, my parents were completely silent. The next few days in the hospital were a strange reversal of everything I'd known. My parents, who had spent years dismissing my health concerns, suddenly transformed into hypervigilant guardians. Mom barely left my bedside, obsessively writing down every word Dr. Martinez said. Dad spent hours researching Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome on his phone, asking the nurses endless questions about my vital signs. Their guilt was palpable, manifesting in different ways. Mom kept crying at random moments, especially when she thought I was sleeping. "We should have listened," I heard her whisper to Dad one night. All those times she told us something was wrong. Dad dealt with it by trying to take control of the situation, demanding second opinions and questioning every medication the nurses brought. It was almost suffocating, this sudden swing from complete dismissal to overwhelming concern. "The surgery is scheduled for Thursday," Dr. Martinez announced during her morning rounds. "We'll perform a cardiac ablation to correct the abnormal pathway. The success rate is high, but like any heart procedure, there are risks we need to discuss." As she explained the procedure, I noticed Mom's hands trembling as she took notes. Dad had gone completely pale, his usual confident demeanor shattered. "And you're sure this has been there since birth?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "All this time?" Dr. Martinez nodded. DPW is a congenital condition. The symptoms often become more pronounced in the late teens or early 20s, which explains why Olivia's episodes have been getting worse. I thought about all the warning signs we'd ignored. The time I'd nearly passed out during my high school graduation ceremony, which they'd blamed on me not eating enough breakfast. The countless morning runs I'd had to cut short because my heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. "You're just out of shape," they'd said. "Maybe if you exercised more regularly." Anna visited that afternoon, bringing my laptop and some books. Unlike my parents, she always believed me when I said something was wrong. She'd be the one to drive me to the ER that night, not questioning my judgment for a second. "Your mom cornered me in the hallway," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed. She was crying, asking if I'd noticed any symptoms they'd missed. I didn't have the heart to tell her about all the times you called me instead of them, because you knew they wouldn't take you seriously. I sighed, adjusting my position to ease the pressure of the heart monitors. "They're trying to make up for it now, I guess." "Better late than never," Anna replied, but her tone suggested she wasn't ready to forgive them either. That evening, I overheard my parents talking to Dr. Martinez outside my room. They thought I was sleeping, but their voices carried through the partially open door. "Could this have been prevented if we caught it earlier?" Mom's voice was thick with tears. "The condition itself is congenital," Dr. Martinez explained patiently, "but yes, the severity of these episodes might have been managed better with earlier intervention. The important thing now is to focus on Olivia's treatment and recovery." "We just didn't think," Dad started. "That's right, you didn't think." Dr. Martinez's voice was firm but not unkind. "Your daughter knew her body was telling her something was wrong. She needed you to believe her, not dismiss her." The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Later that night, as I pretended to sleep, Mom sat beside my bed, gently holding my hand. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she whispered, thinking I couldn't hear. "We failed you. We were so busy telling you to stop being dramatic that we didn't see you were actually fighting to tell us something was wrong." Dad stood by the window, his silhouette rigid against the city lights. I'd never seen him look so defeated. He'd always been the one to tell me to toughen up, to stop looking for attention. Now he looked like he aged 10 years in 3 days. The next morning, Dr. Martinez came to do final checks before the surgery. As she explained the procedure again, I noticed something had shifted in my parents' demeanor. They were still worried, still guilty, but there was something else now. A determination to do better, to be better. "We'll be right here when you wake up," Mom promised, squeezing my hand as the nurses prepared to take me to pre-op. Dad, who had never been good with emotional moments, simply kissed my forehead, something he hadn't done since I was a little girl. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I caught one last glimpse of my parents. They stood together, supporting each other, looking nothing like the dismissive, impatient people who had ignored my symptoms for so long. They looked scared, vulnerable, and finally, ready to listen. The surgery was successful, but recovery brought its own set of challenges. My parents, determined to make up for years of dismissal, swung to the opposite extreme. Mom monitored my every breath, and Dad installed a medical alert system in the house despite Dr. Martinez assuring them it wasn't necessary. "Mom, I can walk to the bathroom by myself," I protested 2 weeks after returning home. "The doctor said I should resume normal activities gradually. But what if something happens?" She hovered nearby, ready to catch me if I so much as stumbled. "What if your heart?" "Then I'll tell you," I interrupted firmly, "just like I've been telling you for months that something was wrong. The difference is this time I know you'll listen." Her face crumpled at that, the guilt still fresh. Dad, who'd been pretending to read the newspaper, set it down with a heavy sigh. "We deserve that," he said quietly. "Every bit of it." During my follow-up appointment, Dr. Martinez reviewed my recovery progress. My parents sat beside me, taking notes and asking questions, actually listening this time. "Your heart is responding well to the ablation," she said, showing us my latest test results. "The irregular pathway has been successfully treated. However," she turned to my parents, "we need to discuss the anxiety issues that may arise during recovery." Mom started to protest, probably wanting to deny any suggestion of anxiety, but caught herself. I saw the effort it took for her to stay quiet and listen. "Many patients who've had their symptoms dismissed develop anxiety about being believed when they report health concerns," Dr. Martinez explained. "It's important to create an environment where Olivia feels safe expressing her concerns without fear of being dismissed." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We've been reading about that," he admitted. "About how dismissing physical symptoms can cause emotional damage. The support group has been really helpful," Mom added, referring to the online community of DBPU parents they'd joined. Hearing other families' stories, realizing how many other parents made the same mistakes we did. 3 months after the surgery, I was cleared to return to college for the spring semester. The night before I left, I found Mom in my room, organizing my medication and emergency contact lists. "I've programmed all the nearby hospitals into your phone," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I've marked all the 24-hour pharmacies near campus." "Mom," I touched her arm, stopping her nervous organizing. "I'm okay now. You don't have to overcompensate for before." She sat down on my bed, tears filling her eyes. "When I think about how close we came to losing you because we wouldn't listen." "But you're listening now," I said, sitting beside her. "That's what matters." Dad appeared in the doorway, carrying a small box. "Got you something for school," he said gruffly, trying to hide his emotion. Inside was a new Apple Watch with heart monitoring capabilities. "It's not because we don't trust you to know your own body," he added quickly. "It's just an extra tool, if you want it." I hugged him, feeling him relax slightly. "Thanks, Dad." The changes in my family weren't just about medical attention. They started really hearing me in other areas too. When I mentioned wanting to switch my major from business, their choice, to psychology, my passion, they actually listened to my reasoning instead of dismissing it. "You want to help other people whose symptoms have been dismissed," Mom said thoughtfully, "to be the voice you needed. We'll support whatever path you choose," Dad added, surprising me. "We've learned the hard way what happens when we don't listen to you." A year after my surgery, I stood in front of a support group for young people with invisible illnesses, sharing my story. My parents sat in the back of the room, at my invitation, listening as I described the journey from dismissal to diagnosis. "The hardest part wasn't the physical pain," I told the group. "It was not being believed. But I've learned that sometimes it takes a crisis for people to change, to really start listening." After the meeting, a teenage girl approached us with her parents. "Your story, it's exactly what we're going through," her mother said, wiping tears. "We've been telling her it's just stress." I watched as my parents shared their perspective, openly acknowledging their mistakes and what they've learned. Dad, who once dismissed every medical complaint as dramatic, was now earnestly explaining the importance of believing your children's health concerns. "The surgery fixed my heart," I added, "but what really healed was the way my family learned to listen. Sometimes the scariest symptoms aren't physical. They're the ones that show up in relationships when trust has been broken." That evening, driving home, Mom turned to me from the passenger seat. "You know, Olivia, you've taught us more than any doctor could. You taught us that listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about believing, supporting, and respecting someone's experience." Dad nodded from the back seat. "And we'll never stop learning that lesson." I smiled, feeling my heart beat steadily in my chest. Strong, healthy, and finally, truly heard. This wedding needs a proper touch of class. Amanda smirked, tossing aside the carefully crafted seating chart I'd spent weeks perfecting. Honestly, Emily deserves better than this. She gestured dismissively at the mood board my daughter and I had created together. My name is Sarah, and I was watching my sister-in-law systematically dismantle every plan I'd made for my only daughter's wedding. The worst part? Emily wasn't even here to see it happening. Sarah clearly doesn't understand modern weddings, my mother-in-law, Margaret, chimed in, hovering behind Amanda like an approving shadow. Thank goodness you're here to save this from becoming an embarrassment. I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself to stay calm. For 6 months, I've been planning this wedding with Emily, pouring my heart into every detail. The vintage-inspired centerpieces, the hand-lettered place cards, the carefully chosen color scheme. Each element held special meaning. But now, with just 3 weeks until the ceremony, Amanda had swooped in like an unwelcome hurricane. It started with small suggestions at first. The flowers you chose are so basic, or those centerpieces look rather dated, don't they? But yesterday, everything changed. Amanda announced to the entire family that she was taking over to ensure the wedding met the proper standards. We'll need to change the flowers completely, Amanda declared, scrolling through her phone. I've already contacted my florist. He's much more exclusive than whatever small-town shop you were using. The small-town shop she was dismissing belonged to my best friend Maria, who'd been excitedly working on Emily's arrangements for months. Each bouquet was being crafted with flowers that matched those from my own wedding, a detail that had brought tears to Emily's eyes when we planned it. And these place cards, Amanda continued, wrinkling her nose. Handwritten? Really? We'll order proper ones, something elegant. Emily wanted those handwritten, I said quietly. Her grandmother and I wrote them together. Well, Emily doesn't know any better, does she? Margaret interjected. She's young. She needs guidance from people who understand sophistication. My mother-in-law had always made it clear that she thought her precious son had married beneath him. 25 years later, she still hadn't forgiven me for not coming from the right background. Now she was using my daughter's wedding to prove her point. I've taken the liberty of revising the guest list, Amanda announced, pulling out a new spreadsheet. We've added several family friends who simply must be included. They're very well connected. There's no room in the venue for extra guests, I protested. Emily and James chose that space specifically because. Oh, that's been handled, Amanda interrupted with a wave of her hand. I've booked the Grand Plaza instead. Much more suitable. We can't have family arriving at some converted barn. The converted barn was a beautifully restored historic venue that Emily and James had fallen in love with instantly. They put down a non-refundable deposit the same day they saw it. You can't just change the venue, I said, my voice shaking. Emily and James chose that place. They've paid for it. Already taken care of, Margaret said smugly. We've handled the deposit for the Grand Plaza. The family name carries weight there. I felt the room spinning slightly. This wasn't just about changing decorations anymore. They were completely hijacking my daughter's wedding. Everything she and James had carefully chosen was being erased, replaced with Amanda's vision of what a proper wedding should be. Does Emily know about any of this? I asked, already knowing the answer. We thought it best not to burden her with the details, Amanda replied, not even looking up from her phone. She's already stressed enough. When she sees how much better everything is, she'll thank us. I pulled out my phone, ready to call my daughter, but Margaret's hand shot out to stop me. Don't you dare ruin this, Sarah, she hissed. Emily deserves a wedding that the family can be proud of. Lord knows her mother's taste wouldn't provide that. The words stung, but not as much as they once would have. Years of Margaret's subtle and not-so-subtle digs had thickened my skin. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Emily's day being stolen from her. I think we're done here, Amanda announced, gathering her papers. I have a meeting with the new caterer in an hour. We'll need to completely revamp the menu, of course. No one serves comfort food at a society wedding. The comfort food menu had been James' contribution to the planning. He and Emily had chosen dishes that told the story of their relationship, from the pasta he cooked on their first date to the chocolate cake from the bakery where he proposed. As they swept out of the room, leaving chaos in their wake, I sat there feeling numb. But beneath the numbness, something was building, a fierce determination I hadn't felt in years. They thought they'd won, thought they could steamroll over every careful plan, every meaningful choice. But they'd forgotten something important. I wasn't just the mother of the bride. I was the woman who'd raised Emily to stand up for what she believed in, to fight for what mattered. And nothing mattered more than making sure my daughter's wedding day remained true to who she was. I picked up my phone again, this time opening my photos. There, carefully documented, was every original plan, every receipt, every contract. Emily might be away on a pre-wedding trip with James, but she'd be back tomorrow. And when she returned, she'd find out exactly what her aunt and grandmother had been up to. Emily's face went from confusion to shock to rage as I showed her the photos of Amanda's improvements to her wedding plans. We sat in my kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the windows, as I detailed everything that had happened in her absence. They changed the venue, she whispered, her hands shaking as she looked at the Grand Plaza contract. Without even asking me. They think they're doing you a favor, I said gently, pushing a cup of tea toward her. Your aunt seems to believe. I don't care what Aunt Amanda believes. Emily's voice cracked. This is my wedding. Mine and James's. Not some society event for her to show off at. I watched my daughter's eyes fill with tears as she scrolled through more photos. The new flower arrangements, the formal place settings, the elaborate centerpieces that had replaced our handmade ones. Everything that had made the wedding personal, meaningful, was gone. Mom, she said quietly, looking up at me. Why didn't you stop them? The question hit me like a physical blow. I tried, honey. But they. No, she cut me off, her voice stronger now. I mean really stop them. You're my mom. This is our wedding. The one we planned together. She was right, I protested, but I hadn't truly stood my ground. Years of conditioning by Margaret and Amanda had taught me to back down, to avoid conflict. But seeing the hurt in my daughter's eyes, I knew that had to change. Just then, my phone buzzed. Amanda's name flashed on the screen, along with a text that made my blood boil. Meeting with the new photographer at 2. Don't bother coming, we know what we're doing. Emily read the message over my shoulder, and something in her seemed to snap. That's it, she said, standing up so quickly that her chair scraped against the floor. We're going to the venue. Now? Which one? I asked, already grabbing my keys. Our venue, the real one. The drive to the restored barn venue was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. As we pulled up, the owner, Sarah, was outside tending to her flower beds. Her face lit up when she saw us. Emily, Sarah, I was getting worried. Your aunt called yesterday to cancel, but I told her I could only accept cancellation from the contract holders. Emily and I exchanged looks. You didn't cancel? Emily asked. Sarah shook her head. Of course not. The contract is in your names. I've known your mom for years. I wasn't about to let someone else undo all your planning. Relief flooded through me. At least one thing was still under our control. Thank you, Emily said, hugging her impulsively. You have no idea how much that means. Inside the barn, everything was exactly as we'd left it. The vintage chandeliers we'd chosen still hung from the restored beams. The space where our handmade centerpieces would go was waiting. This was the wedding we'd planned. Emily walked to the center of the room, her footsteps echoing in the peaceful space. Mom, she said, turning to face me, I need you to promise me something. Anything, honey. Promise me you won't let them take this away from us. No more being nice. No more backing down to keep the peace. This is our wedding, and we're taking it back. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Margaret. Amanda's ordered new invitations, much more appropriate than those crafty things you chose. We'll need your guest list redone to include proper social connections. Emily read the message, and her jaw set in a determined line I recognized from my own mirror. Call them, she said. Tell them to meet us here. Now. Are you sure? She nodded. It's time they understood exactly whose wedding this is. An hour later, Amanda's Mercedes pulled up outside the barn, followed by Margaret's luxury SUV. They swept in like royalty preparing to inspect a peasant's home. Oh, good you're here, Amanda said, barely glancing at us. We need to document everything that needs to be upgraded before. No, Emily said, her voice ringing through the space. You need to listen. Amanda and Margaret stopped short, clearly unprepared for resistance. This is my wedding. Emily continued, her voice steady. Mine and James's, not yours. Not your social event. Ours. Darling, Margaret started, using her patronizing tone. We're only trying to help. I don't want your help, Emily cut her off. I don't want your grand plaza or your exclusive florist or your society photographer. I want the wedding Mom and I planned. The one that means something to us. But the family name, Amanda began. I don't care about the family name. Emily's voice rose. I care about marrying the man I love in a way that represents us. Not your social status. I stepped forward, standing beside my daughter. The venue isn't changing. The flowers aren't changing. Nothing is changing. Sarah, Margaret's voice turned cold. Don't be difficult. You've never understood. No, I interrupted, feeling stronger with every word. You've never understood. This isn't about you. It's about Emily. And if you can't respect that, you don't need to be part of it at all. Amanda's face flushed red. Are you threatening to exclude us from the wedding? No, Emily said calmly. We're setting boundaries. You can either respect them and be part of our celebration, or you can go have your society event somewhere else. But this wedding, it's staying exactly as we planned it. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret and Amanda stood there, clearly unused to being challenged. But as I looked at my daughter, standing tall and assured in the venue she'd chosen, I knew we'd already won. The next week was a whirlwind of damage control. Emily and I worked tirelessly to restore our original plans, undoing each of Amanda's unwanted improvements. Maria was overjoyed when we reconfirmed her as our florist, throwing in extra flowers at no charge because some things matter more than money. The original photographer, a friend of James's family, was equally relieved to be back on board. But Amanda and Margaret weren't going down without a fight. The family is talking, Margaret announced during an uncomfortable Sunday dinner. Everyone's wondering why Emily is insisting on such a modest celebration. Let them talk, Emily replied, not looking up from her plate. It's not their wedding. The Grand Plaza called 3 times, pressured by Amanda to hold the date despite our cancellation. I finally had to send them our original venue contract to prove we had no intention of changing locations. Then came the guest list drama. The Haversons are devastated about being cut from the list, Amanda said, cornering me after church. And the Whitfields. Do you know how much influence they have in this town? The venue holds 120 people, I reminded her. Emily and James want their actual friends there, not your social connections. But the real explosion came when Emily and I reinstated our original catering menu. Comfort food. Margaret practically shrieked when she found out. At a wedding? What will people think? They'll think it's delicious, Emily said firmly, and meaningful to us. That's what matters. The day before the wedding, I found Emily sitting in our kitchen, looking at old photos. One in particular caught my eye. Emily at age 6, wearing my wedding dress as a makeshift princess gown while I knelt beside her, adjusting the trailing fabric. I remember that day, I said softly. You told me you wanted your wedding to be just like mine. Simple, meaningful, and full of love. She smiled, wiping away a tear. That's exactly what it's going to be. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. The restored barn looked magical, with sunlight streaming through the windows onto our handmade centerpieces. Maria's flowers were perfect, incorporating blooms from both my wedding and Emily's grandmother's garden. Amanda and Margaret arrived early, dressed to the nines, clearly still hoping to put their stamp on things. But when they walked in, they stopped short. The space was transformed, but not in the way they'd imagined. Instead of cold elegance, there was warm, inviting beauty. Instead of formal place cards, there were the ones Emily's grandmother and I had lovingly written. Each table told a story, of family, of love, of traditions that mattered more than social status. Oh, Amanda said softly, and for once she seemed at a loss for words. The ceremony was everything Emily and James had dreamed of. They exchanged vows under a flower arch made from Emily's grandmother's favorite roses. The comfort food dinner was a hit, with guests raving about the personal touches in each dish. Even Margaret had to admit the chocolate cake from James's proposal was actually quite good. But the real moment of victory came during the father-daughter dance. As Emily swayed with her father, I overheard Amanda talking to another guest. Yes, they did all this themselves, she was saying, and there was something new in her voice. Was it respect? Emily knew exactly what she wanted, just like her mother. Later, as the party was winding down, Emily found me by the dessert table. "Thank you, Mom," she said, hugging me tight, "not just for helping with the wedding, but for teaching me to stand up for what matters." I held my daughter close, feeling the years of doubt and insecurity melt away. We had done it. We had created exactly the celebration Emily and James wanted, despite all the pressure to conform to someone else's standards. As I watched the happy couple drive away, Margaret appeared beside me. "You did well, Sarah," she said quietly. "This wedding, it was perfect for them." I was wrong to try to change it. It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from Margaret, it was close enough. Amanda joined us, looking thoughtful. "You know," she said, "my daughter's getting married next year. Perhaps you could share some of your ideas about making it personal." I smiled, thinking of how far we'd come. "I'd like that," I said. "After all, that's what family does, helps each other create something meaningful." The last guest departed, leaving the barn glowing softly in the evening light. Everything had turned out exactly as it should have. Not because it was the fanciest or most elaborate celebration, but because it was true to who Emily and James were and to the family values that really mattered. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about winning a battle. It's about protecting what's truly important. And in the end, that's exactly what we did. "She's simply not good enough, Emily. My studio has a reputation to maintain." I watched my sister-in-law, Amanda's perfectly manicured fingers drum against her mahogany desk as she delivered this verdict about my 12-year-old daughter, Sophie. The late afternoon sun streaming through her office window caught the diamond tennis bracelet I'd heard her bragging about, a small gift she'd bought herself with the studio's success. "Sophie's been dancing here for 6 years," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "She practices more than any other student. You've seen her dedication." Amanda's lips curved into that condescending smile I'd grown to hate over the years. "Dedication doesn't equal talent. The winter recital is our biggest event of the year. I can't have her mediocre performance bringing down the whole show." My hands clenched in my lap as I thought about Sophie, waiting in the car outside because Amanda had insisted this be an adults-only conversation. My daughter, who spent every spare moment practicing, who begged for extra lessons, who danced in our garage until midnight because she was determined to perfect her techniques. "This isn't about talent," I said. "This is about your ego." Amanda's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" "Ever since Sophie won the regional junior solo competition last spring, the one where your daughter Lily placed third, you've been finding reasons to criticize her." "That's ridiculous," Amanda snapped, but I caught the flash of anger in her eyes. Lily's setback was temporary. She was recovering from a sprained ankle. Everyone knows she's the more talented dancer. Of course. Lily, Amanda's pride and joy, who'd been handed leading roles since she could walk. Who never had to audition, never had to prove herself because her mother owned the studio. Sophie earned her spot in that competition. I continued. Just like she earned her place in this recital. You can't just kick her out 3 weeks before the show. Amanda stood up, smoothing her designer blazer. "Actually, I can. My studio, my rules. Sophie's just not up to our standards. Perhaps you should look into some recreational dance classes at the community center. Something more her speed." The dismissal in her voice made my blood boil. This wasn't just about a dance recital. This was about Amanda's need to ensure her daughter always came first, always shone brightest. She'd been this way since she married my brother Mark 5 years ago, constantly competing, constantly proving her family's superiority. "Sophie's already memorized her solo," I argued. "She's been rehearsing with the group for months. What am I supposed to tell her?" "Tell her life isn't fair," Amanda said with a shrug. "Better she learn that now. Besides, this will free up the solo spot for someone more deserving. Like Lily, she didn't need to add." I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You're making a mistake." "No, Emily. The mistake was letting Sophie continue this long when she clearly doesn't have what it takes. I mean, really, look at her body type. She'll never have a dancer's build like Lily." That was it. I'd sat through years of Amanda's subtle digs, her backhanded compliments, her constant undermining of Sophie's confidence. But body-shaming my 12-year-old daughter, that crossed the line. "We're done here," I said, my voice ice cold. "You'll have our withdrawal paperwork tomorrow." Amanda's eyes widened slightly. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to pull Sophie from the studio entirely. "Don't be hasty. Sophie can still take regular classes. She's just not recital material. Save it. I cut her off. You've made your position clear, but remember this moment, Amanda. Remember exactly what you did and why. As I turned to leave, she called after me. She'll never make it as a dancer, Emily. You're only setting her up for disappointment. I closed the door on her words and walked through the studio's lobby, past the walls lined with photos of past performances. Sophie was in many of them, always in the back row, always in supporting roles, while Lily dominated the center spots. How had I not seen it sooner? Sophie looked up as I approached the car, her face hopeful. She pulled her long brown hair into her signature neat bun, wearing her favorite practice leotard. Ready to rehearse, as always. My heart clenched. What did Aunt Amanda say? Can I still do my solo? I took a deep breath, sliding into the driver's seat. No, honey. She doesn't think it's the right time. Sophie's face fell, but she quickly tried to hide it. Oh, okay, maybe next time. Actually, I said, starting the car, we're going to be leaving Amazing Grace Dance Studio. What? But Mom, all my friends are here, and the recital. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes we need to make hard choices. Trust me, this is for the best. As we drove home, Sophie fell silent, staring out the window. I could almost see her dreams crumbling, and it broke my heart. But I also knew my daughter. Beneath her quiet exterior was a determination that Amanda had completely underestimated. What my dear sister-in-law didn't know was that I'd already been in talks with Madame Dubois, a retired principal dancer who taught advanced students privately. I'd seen her watching Sophie at competitions, had noticed her thoughtful expression. Last week, she'd approached me about private lessons. Your daughter has something special, she'd said. Raw talent is common. Dedication like hers is rare. I glanced at Sophie in the rearview mirror, saw the tears she was trying to hide, and made a decision. Amanda thought she was crushing a young dancer's dreams. Instead, she was about to witness what happens when you push someone to prove you wrong. How about we stop for ice cream? I suggested. I have something exciting to tell you about your dance future. Sophie met my eyes in the mirror, a spark of hope returning. She had no idea what was coming, but I did. In 3 months, the National Youth Dance Competition would show Amanda exactly what she'd thrown away. The first time Sophie walked into Madame Dubois' home studio, I saw something shift in her expression. Gone were the mirrors covered in motivational quotes about perfection and excellence that had dominated Amanda's studio. Instead, simple ballet bars lined the walls, and afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows onto the hardwood floors. Madame Dubois herself was nothing like Amanda. In her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat chignon, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. So, she said, her French accent subtle but present, you're the young dancer everyone underestimates. Sophie glanced at me nervously, but Madame Dubois continued, Good. Being underestimated is a gift. It means you can surprise people. Over the next few weeks, I watched my daughter transform. Under Madame Dubois' guidance, Sophie's dancing evolved from technically precise but cautious to something more powerful. She was no longer dancing to please Amanda or match Lily's style. She was finding her own voice. Your daughter has fire, Madame Dubois told me one afternoon as Sophie practiced. At your sister-in-law's studio, they tried to contain it. Here, we let it burn. The changes weren't just in her dancing. Sophie's confidence grew. She stood taller, smiled more often. The constant anxiety about measuring up to Lily's standards melted away. Of course, Amanda couldn't resist trying to check up on us. She sent my brother Mark to casually ask about Sophie's dancing during family dinner. I heard she's taking lessons from some retired dancer. Amanda interjected, picking at her salad. How quaint, though I suppose it's better than nothing. I caught the familiar smirk playing at her lips, the one that said she was still certain she'd won. Let her think that, I decided. She'd find out soon enough. Sophie seems happy, Mark offered, earning a sharp glance from his wife. Happiness doesn't win competitions, Amanda replied. Just look at Lily's trophy collection. That comes from proper training at a real studio. I bit back a response, remembering Madame Dubois' words. Let your dancing do the talking. The National Youth Dance Competition was approaching fast. Sophie and Madame Dubois had crafted a contemporary solo that showcased everything Amanda had tried to suppress. Sophie's natural power, her emotional depth, her unique style. This isn't just about winning, Madame Dubois reminded Sophie during their final rehearsal. This is about showing the world who you truly are as a dancer. 2 days before the competition, I received a text from Amanda. Heard Sophie's competing at nationals. How brave of her to put herself out there. Lily's solo is already generating buzz among the judges. Hope Sophie doesn't feel too disappointed when she sees what real talent looks like. I showed the message to Madame Dubois, who merely raised an eyebrow. Your sister-in-law lacks class, she said simply. But more importantly, she lacks vision. She sees dance as a trophy to be won, not an art to be lived. The morning of the competition, we arrived at the convention center to find it buzzing with activity. Dancers from across the country warmed up in every available space, their sequined costumes catching a light. We spotted Amanda and Lily near the registration desk, surrounded by their usual entourage of studio parents. Amanda's face tightened when she saw us, but she quickly masked it with a bright smile. Sophie, what a surprise to see you here. She air-kissed my cheek. And you must be her new teacher. Madame Dubois gave a slight nod. Indeed, and you are the one who let this talented young dancer slip away. How unfortunate for you. Amanda's smile faltered. Before she could respond, the announcer called for junior solo competitors to prepare. Break a leg, Sophie, Lily said, but the words carried the same condescending tone her mother had perfected. Try not to be too nervous when you see my new turning sequence. Sophie just smiled. Good luck, Lily. Dance your best. As we headed to the dressing room, I heard Amanda stage whisper to another mother. Can you believe they're actually going through with this? It's almost cruel, letting her embarrass herself at this level. Sophie squeezed my hand. It's okay, Mom. I'm not dancing for them anymore. Watching from the wings, I held my breath as Sophie took the stage. The opening notes of her music filled the auditorium. Not the typical competition piece, but a haunting melody Madame Dubois had discovered. From the first movement, I knew something special was happening. Sophie wasn't just performing her choreography. She was telling her story. Every leap, every turn spoke of resilience, of breaking free, of finding strength in being different. The audience fell completely silent. Even the judges leaned forward in their seats. When Sophie struck her final pose, there was a moment of absolute stillness before the auditorium erupted in applause. I caught a glimpse of Amanda's face in the crowd, her expression a mix of shock and dismay. Lily performed next, her routine filled with impressive technical tricks and flashy movements. It was exactly what the old Sophie had tried to emulate, but now it felt hollow somehow, lacking the emotional depth we just witnessed. As we waited for the results, Madame Dubois kept Sophie focused with warm-up exercises, ignoring the whispers and stares from Amanda's studio crowd. Remember, she told Sophie, whatever happens, you've already won. You found your truth as a dancer. That's worth more than any medal. But as the scores were about to be announced, I couldn't help noticing how Amanda had positioned herself near the podium, ready to celebrate what she clearly assumed would be another victory for her studio. The announcer cleared his throat, and I reached for Sophie's hand. What happened next would change everything, not just for Sophie and Amanda, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough to follow their dreams. In third place, the announcer's voice echoed through the auditorium. From Elite Dance Academy, Madison Chen. Amanda shifted impatiently, her hand already on Lily's shoulder. She positioned them perfectly for the cameras, ready for what she clearly assumed would be another first-place victory. In second place, there was a pause that felt like eternity. From Amazing Grace Dance Studio, Lily Matthews. The confident smile froze on Amanda's face. Lily's shoulders slumped slightly before she caught herself, remembering her mother's constant lectures about maintaining proper appearance. And your junior solo division champion with the highest score we've seen in this age group in over a decade. I felt Sophie's hand tighten in mine. From Independent Study under Madame Dubois, Sophie Harrison. The auditorium erupted in applause. Madame Dubois gave a small, satisfied nod, while I fought back tears of pride. But it was Amanda's reaction that caught everyone's attention. This is impossible, she exclaimed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. There must be some mistake. I demand to see the judges' scores. Sophie was already walking toward the podium when Amanda grabbed my arm. What did you do? She hissed. Who did you bribe? There's no way she could have beaten Lily fairly. Madame Dubois stepped between us, her voice carrying just enough for the surrounding crowd to hear. The only unfair thing here, madame, is how long you suppress that child's talent. Now, if you'll excuse us, your scene is preventing your niece from receiving her award." Red-faced, Amanda watched as Sophie accepted her trophy and gold medal. The head judge was explaining something about extraordinary artistic expression and emotional maturity beyond her years. But Amanda had already turned away, practically dragging a tearful Lily toward the exit. Later, during the reception, dance teachers and studio owners kept approaching us. Many had questions about Sophie's training, impressed by how her style had evolved. A few even quietly mentioned their own experiences with Amanda's studio politics. "Mom," Sophie called out, rushing over with her phone. "Look at this." She showed me a social media post from the competition's official account. They had shared a clip of her performance, and it was already going viral in the dance community. The comments were flooding in. "This is what real artistry looks like. Who is this amazing young dancer?" Finally, something authentic in competition dance. That's when my brother Mark approached, looking uncomfortable. "Emily, can we talk?" He led me to a quiet corner. "I had no idea," he said softly, "about any of it. The way Amanda treated Sophie, how's she? I've been watching some of the studio practices lately. Really watching. It's not right." "No," I agreed. "It's not. I've enrolled Lily in therapy," he continued. "The pressure Amanda puts on her, it's affecting her badly. And after seeing Sophie dance today, how happy she looks." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "I'm making some changes at home. Big ones." I squeezed his hand, understanding what he wasn't saying. Across the room, I spotted Amanda making one last desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, telling anyone who would listen about how she'd discovered Sophie's talent, how she'd always known she was special. But it was too late. The truth had danced its way into the spotlight. That evening, as Sophie carefully placed her trophy on her desk, she turned to me with thoughtful eyes. "Mom, I'm glad Aunt Amanda kicked me out of her studio." "You are?" She nodded. "If she hadn't, I might never have found out who I really am as a dancer, or met Madame Dubois, or learned that sometimes the bad things people do to us lead us somewhere better." I hugged her, marveling at her wisdom. "When did you get so smart?" "Probably around the same time I learned that being good enough for someone else isn't as important as being right for yourself." The next day, Sophie received an invitation to join an elite summer intensive program, one that Amanda had always bragged about Lily attending. But Sophie surprised me again. "I think I'll stay here and keep training with Madame Dubois," she decided. "She helps me remember why I love dancing in the first place." As I watched her head to the studio that afternoon, I thought about Amanda's words from 3 months ago. She'll never make it as a dancer. Sometimes the best response to people who underestimate you isn't to prove them wrong. It's to soar so far beyond their limited vision that they become irrelevant to your story entirely. Sophie had done exactly that, and her journey was just beginning. The phone buzzed against my kitchen counter as I helped Noah, my 8-year-old son, prepare his favorite lunch, peanut butter sandwich, cut precisely into 4 triangles. I glanced at the caller ID. "Amanda, my sister-in-law." "Your son makes Mom uncomfortable." Amanda's voice crackled through the speaker without so much as a hello. "We think it's best if you skip her birthday celebration this weekend." My hand stilled on the sandwich knife, but I kept my voice steady for Noah's sake. "Excuse me." "Look, Olivia, we all know how Noah can get at family gatherings. The noises, the movements. Mom's turning 65, and she deserves a perfect day. We want her to be comfortable." I watched Noah meticulously align his sandwich triangles, his gentle humming a reminder of how far he'd come in his therapy. My beautiful, brilliant boy, who could name every planet in the solar system and recite pi to 30 decimal places. "Amanda, we're coming. Noah is your mother's grandson, and—" "God, you're so selfish," she cut in. "It's not always about you and Noah. Think about someone else for once. Mom specifically said she doesn't want any disruptions." The word disruptions hung in the air like poison. I felt heat rise in my chest, but years of advocating for Noah had taught me to channel anger into action. "Put Carol on the phone," I said, referring to my mother-in-law. "She's not available," Amanda replied too quickly. "Just don't come, okay? We'll send photos." The line went dead. I stood there, gripping the counter, as Noah finished arranging his lunch with precise, careful movements. My husband, Mark, was away on a business trip, but I knew what he'd say. We had countless conversations about his family's treatment of Noah, their subtle exclusions growing more overt with each passing year. I opened my phone's gallery, finding a video from last Christmas. Noah was sitting with Carol, his grandmother, showing her his new astronomy book. She was actually smiling, engaged in his detailed explanation of black holes. That was before Amanda's influence had really taken hold. Mom? Noah's voice pulled me back to the present. Are we going to Grandma's party? I looked at my son, taking in his questioning blue eyes, so much like his father's. He'd been talking about the party for weeks, excited to show his grandmother the special card he'd made, covered in carefully drawn constellations because she once told him she loved looking at the stars. Yes, sweetheart, I said firmly. We're definitely going. Over the next few days, I received a barrage of texts from Amanda. Mom's really anxious about this. Why can't you just think about others for once? Everyone agrees it's better if you don't come. I saved every message, forwarding them to Mark. His responses were immediate and furious, but I asked him not to confront them yet. I had a different approach in mind. On Saturday morning, I helped Noah dress in his favorite blue button-down shirt. He struggled with the buttons but insisted on doing them himself, his face screwed up in concentration. Remember our strategies, I said as we drove to Carol's house. If things get overwhelming, find a quiet space, use my headphones, or ask you for help, he finished, proud of remembering his tools. Mom, did you know that Saturn's density is so low it would float in water if you could find a bathtub big enough? I smiled at his endless fascination with space facts. That's amazing, honey. Maybe you can tell Grandma about that today. As we pulled up to Carol's house, I could see the party was already in full swing. Balloons decorated the front porch, and through the windows, I spotted familiar faces of family members who had clearly received Amanda's memo about our uninvited status. Noah clutched his handmade card, his other hand finding mine as we walked to the door. I could feel a slight tremor in his fingers, but his steps were steady. I rang the doorbell. Amanda yanked it open, her face flushing red when she saw us. What are you doing here? I told you. Happy birthday, Grandma. Noah's voice carried past Amanda into the house, where Carol appeared in the hallway, a party hat perched on her silver hair. Noah. Carol's face lit up with genuine surprise and what looked like pleasure, before she caught Amanda's expression and quickly schooled her features into something more neutral. But I'd seen it, that moment of real joy. More importantly, Noah had seen it too. I made you a card, he said, stepping forward. It has all the constellations you can see on your birthday. Did you know that the stars you see tonight are the same ones that were in the sky the day you were born, just in a different position because of Earth's rotation and... Noah, Amanda interrupted sharply, causing him to flinch. Grandma doesn't need a science lecture right now. I opened my mouth to intervene, but someone else beat me to it. Actually, came a firm voice from behind Carol. I'd love to hear more about those stars. Mark stepped into view, his business trip apparently ending earlier than scheduled. He moved past his sister and mother, placing a hand on Noah's shoulder. Why don't you tell us all about it, buddy? I'm sure everyone at the party would love to learn something new today. The look he gave Amanda could have frozen hell itself. And that's when the real party began. Mark's unexpected presence changed the entire dynamic of the party. Amanda's face cycled through various shades of red as family members gathered in the living room, with Noah positioned at the center, his astronomy knowledge on full display. And that's why Grandma's zodiac constellation is Leo, Noah explained, his confidence growing with each attentive nod from the audience. Even my mother-in-law, Carol, seemed to be softening, her earlier hesitation melting as she watched her grandson shine. But Amanda wasn't done. She hovered at the edges of the group, wine glass clutched too tightly in her manicured hands. I recognized that look, the same one she'd worn at every family gathering where Noah had stolen her spotlight. Present time, she suddenly announced, cutting off Noah mid-sentence about meteor showers. Mom, you should open mine first. I felt Noah tense beside me, his fingers starting their familiar tapping pattern against his leg. Mark noticed too, moving closer to provide the steady presence our son needed. Amanda thrust an elaborately wrapped package into Carol's hands. It's from me and the kids, you know, your other grandchildren. The emphasis wasn't subtle. Carol unwrapped an expensive-looking crystal photo frame, filled with pictures of Amanda's 3 children at various family events we'd never been invited to. "Oh, look at all these wonderful memories," Amanda gushed, pointing at each photo. "Remember that beach trip last summer? And the Christmas pageant? All those perfect family moments." Noah's tapping increased. He understood exclusion better than anyone gave him credit for. "I have more pictures to add," Amanda continued, pulling out her phone. "From last month's camping trip and—" "What camping trip?" Mark interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. The room grew still. Carol suddenly became very interested in adjusting her party hat. "Oh," Amanda said, false sweetness dripping from her voice. "Didn't Mom tell you? Just a little family getaway. We didn't think Noah would enjoy it." Before either Mark or I could respond, Noah stood up. His hands were shaking, but his voice was clear. "I like camping," he said. "Did you know that ancient astronomers used to study the stars while camping? They made maps of the sky that we still use today. I could have shown you how to find the North Star, and—" "Nobody wants another space lecture," Amanda snapped. "This is exactly why we didn't invite you. You can't just act normal for 1 minute, can you?" The room gasped. Several relatives quickly found reasons to examine their shoes. Noah's face crumpled, but instead of melting down as Amanda clearly expected, he took a deep breath, just like we practiced, and reached for his backpack. "I brought my noise-canceling headphones," he said quietly, "for when things get too loud, and my stress ball for when my hands need to move. I've been practicing. I wanted to be ready for Grandma's party." Carol set down the crystal frame, her hands trembling slightly. "Noah," she started, but Amanda cut her off again. "Mom, don't let them guilt you. We all know how hard it is having him around. Remember Thanksgiving and Easter? He ruins every holiday." "That's enough." Mark's voice cracked like a whip. "Noah, buddy, why don't you show Grandpa Tom your consolation card? I need to have a word with Aunt Amanda." But Noah surprised us all again. "It's okay, Dad. I want to stay." He turned to Amanda, clutching his stress ball. "You don't like me very much, Aunt Amanda. That's okay. Did you know that in space, there are things called binary stars? They look like one star, but they're actually 2 different stars, spinning around each other. They're different, but they make something beautiful together. We could be like that, maybe. Different but still family." The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's wine glass trembled in her grip. Carol made a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "Well," came a voice from the back of the room. Aunt Susan, Amanda's own mother-in-law, stepped forward. "I think that's the most sensible thing anyone's said all day. Noah, dear, would you tell me more about these binary stars? I've always loved astronomy." As Noah launched into an enthusiastic explanation, other relatives began to drift closer, genuine interest replacing their earlier discomfort. Someone asked about black holes. Another wanted to know about Mars. Amanda stood frozen, watching her carefully orchestrated drama dissolve into a genuine celebration, one where her nephew was the unexpected star. Carol finally found her voice. "Amanda," she said, steel beneath the softness, "I think we need to talk about these family trips you've been organizing. And why half my grandchildren keep disappearing from them." I caught Mark's eye across the room. He nodded slightly. This was Carol's moment to step up, to finally take a stand. As mother and daughter left the room for what promised to be an uncomfortable conversation, I watched Noah flourish under the genuine attention of his relatives. He was using his coping strategies, taking breaks when needed, but mostly just being himself, brilliant, different, and absolutely perfect. Aunt Susan appeared at my elbow. "You know," she said quietly, "I think some of us owe you and Noah an apology. We've let Amanda's concerns influence us for too long. That stops today." I squeezed her hand in response, too choked up for words. The party continued, transforming into something far different from Amanda's vision of perfect. It was messy, real, and punctuated by fascinating space facts. And somehow, that made it better than perfect. It made it true. The aftermath of Carol's birthday party rippled through our family like waves after a storm hits water. The first change came the very next morning when Carol showed up at our door, her eyes red but determined. "I'd like to take Noah to the planetarium," she said. "If that's okay with him, of course. I realize I have a lot to make up for." Noah, who'd been listening from the hallway, emerged with his planetarium fact book already in hand. "Did you know they have a real meteor fragment there, Grandma?" from the perceived shower. The smile that spread across Carol's face was genuine, untouched by Amanda's influence for the first time in years. Over the next few weeks, more family members began reaching out. Aunt Susan organized a family stargazing night specifically for Noah to teach everyone about constellations. Cousins who once avoided him started asking for his help with their science homework. Amanda, however, wasn't going quietly. "You've turned everyone against me," she cornered me after church one Sunday. "Are you happy now?" I watched Noah ahead of us, showing his younger cousin how to use a compass. "No one's against you, Amanda. They're just finally seeing Noah for who he really is, not who you told them he was." "Mom's spending all her time with him now," she said bitterly. "She canceled our weekly lunch dates to take him to that stupid planetarium." "Maybe," I suggested carefully, "you could join them sometime. Noah would love to share that with you too." She scoffed, but I caught something in her expression. A flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even longing. The real breakthrough came a month later. Amanda's oldest daughter, Emily, was struggling with her science project about the solar system. After watching her daughter's frustration build, Amanda did something none of us expected. She called Noah. I stood in the doorway, watching my son patiently explain planetary orbits to his cousin, using oranges and apples as models. Amanda sat nearby, initially stiff and uncomfortable, but gradually leaning in, asking questions of her own. "So that's why Pluto isn't considered a planet anymore?" she asked, genuinely curious. Noah launched into an excited explanation, his hands moving animatedly. Instead of cutting him off or showing irritation, Amanda listened. Really listened. Later, as they were leaving, she paused at the door. "I've been wrong," she said quietly, "about a lot of things. I didn't understand." "No one's asking you to understand everything," I replied. "Just to accept him, to try." She nodded, watching Emily excitedly tell Noah about her project plans for next week. "He's a good kid. A really good kid. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." The final testament to how much things had changed came at the next family gathering, Thanksgiving. Instead of being excluded or barely tolerated, Noah was given a special role. Carol asked him to say grace, but in his own way. He stood at the table, looking at all the faces, some loving, some still learning, but all trying. "Did you know that gratitude is like gravity?" he began. "It's a force that pulls people together, just like gravity holds planets in orbit. Today, I'm grateful for my family, who are like my own solar system. Sometimes we're far apart, like Pluto, and sometimes we're as close as Mercury to the sun. But we're always connected." I saw tears in Carol's eyes, pride in Mark's, and most surprisingly, a small smile on Amanda's face. Later that evening, as families began to leave, Amanda approached Noah. "Hey, space expert," she said, her voice only slightly awkward. "Emily's class is taking a field trip to the observatory next month. I'm chaperoning, and well, we could really use someone who knows their stuff. Would you like to come?" Noah's face lit up brighter than any star he ever described. As I watched them discuss the upcoming trip, Mark slipped his arm around my waist. "Look at that," he murmured. "Our own little binary star system spinning into alignment." Noah was right that day at the birthday party. Different doesn't mean wrong in family. Real family finds a way to shine together, each member adding their own unique light to the constellation. Amanda still has her moments, and not every family gathering is perfect. But now, when Noah needs to take a break or gets overwhelmed with excitement about a new space fact, the family adapts. They've learned that love isn't about changing someone to fit your mold. It's about creating space for everyone to be themselves. As for Noah, he continues to teach us all about stars, space, and the infinite possibilities that exist when you open your heart to understanding. Different but together, just like binary stars in the vast universe of family. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages, teaching us that in the end, acceptance and love are the most powerful forces in any universe, even stronger than gravity itself.